Okay, good day. Welcome to a Travel Companion, where we talk about sustainability, in particular responsible travel and sustainable travel. And we have two very special guests today. Brian Mullis, Carla James, both are directors of the Guyana Tourism Authority. Guyana is well known as a premier destination for protecting its natural and cultural heritage, and roughly 80% of Guyana is forest, and the largest part of that is pristine rainforest.
We're excited to have a conversation on sustainable destination management and development, particularly during these trying times.
Now, I wanted to find out a little bit more, in particular, why this is so important to Guyana. Why is preservation, cultural heritage, ecotourism so important? And with the advent of oil, will the policies of Guyana with regards to this change? Well, now, the GTA, which is short for the Guyana Tourism Authority, is a semi-autonomous governmental organization responsible for developing and promoting sustainable tourism in Guyana. So it seemed to me this might be the right place to find out. And I must say, I was very pleasantly reassured. So it was fantastic to have on the podcast, in particular in these trying times. If you would like to find out more about the GTA, you can visit their website. It's www.guyanatourism.com. If you would like to support the podcast, please go to podcast.org. And then, without further ado, here's the podcast with Carla and Brian. I'm here with the Guyana Tourism Authority, GTA, and I'm speaking with Brian Mullis and Carla James, and they're both directors of the GTA. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having us, Peter. We're so happy to be part here.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're excited to have a conversation on sustainable destination management and development, particularly during these trying times.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really why I'm reaching out. It's obviously it's not easy to get to Guyana. I understand that most of your tourists come from North America and Europe. That's correct, right? Or
and the Caribbean region, as well as our neighboring destinations, particularly Suriname and Brazil.
Fair enough. There was actually an article in the newspaper this morning saying something about the airline industry. They're predicted to lose 250 billion this year. So I was just wondering that might affect tourism in Guyana a little bit. Or?
Yeah, we just had a article released by the World Bank on April 12th that showed that by and large, I think it was GDP was going to be down around 4.5, 4.6% across Latin American Caribbean region. There were two exceptions. One was the Dominican Republic remaining relatively flat, and the other was Guyana growing by over 50%. We have a new up-and-coming oil and gas sector, which in some ways doesn't exactly complement our long-standing green state agenda at a national level, but nonetheless, I think will help Guyana, which as early as 2008 was among the poorest economies in South America, become one of the fastest growing economies in the entire region.
Yeah, at the moment I hear that tourism is the second largest export sector in Guyana after gold. Soon it will most likely be three sectors, oil included as well. Am I correct there? Or?
You are correct. Yeah, we've been second for the last few years and anticipate that we'll eventually become third. But nonetheless, I think because travel and tourism is a non-extractive export sector, when it's well managed, that we have heard of government commitments across political parties to increase investment in sustainable tourism.
Oh, that's brilliant news. That's very good. Actually, a friend of mine went in January this year. Went to Guyana. I had him on the podcast before. Courtney Harewood. He was actually born in Guyana. The first thing he saw, and he sent me a picture, is the #1 eco-tourism destination in the world. I read somewhere that you have a large amount of birds, mammals. Massive mammals, as from what I understand as well. And you have quite a variety, over 6,500 of plants and trees. And I understand that just a little bit less than 3/4 of Guyana consists out of forest. A large amount of that is rainforest. So you are focused yourself on becoming the premier destination for protecting natural and cultural heritage. From what I understand, you have won quite a few awards of that as well. Last year in London, you won the Best in Sustainable Tourism Awards. You won in Berlin the Best of Ecotourism Award, and where the CTO Caribbean Sustainable Tourism Awards are concerned, you won the Destination Stewardship Award as well. Why is sustainable tourism so important for yourself and for Guyana?
Okay, so tourism, so sustainable tourism actually, I think for Guyana, we have a long-standing sustainability agenda. And I think because of that, we have a strong conservation ethic. And sustainability is a way of life for us, basically. Yes, Guyana is getting recognized more and more for protecting its natural and cultural heritage, which provides authentic experience that maximize local socioeconomic outcomes for our locals. Because of that, we have also been building on this with making a concerted effort to ensure that we foster interministerial collaboration, multi-stakeholder collaboration, and ensure that sustainable destination management practices are ingrained in our policies, our plans, regulations, product development, etc. And of course, the net result of that is the awards that we would have gotten next year. So yes, they were really great in achieving it, but the work doesn't stop there. We have to do all we can to make sure that we stay on top and do the right things.
Right. That was going to be my next question. I think you pretty much answered that already. How is this maintained? From what I understand just now is that the government has really made progress already quite a lot, and they are going to continue to do this, is what you just mentioned. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. One thing that we have done recently is completed a country baseline assessment utilizing the Global Sustainable Tourism Council's destination criteria and indicators, working in collaboration with the Green Destinations Foundation to more clearly identify our strengths and areas that require improvement. So through that gap assessment, and speaking to one of the points that Carla made, interministerial multi-stakeholder collaboration is paramount, because while we have influence in all things related to tourism and control over some of those aspects, as we all know, in travel and tourism, since it cuts across multiple sectors, it's paramount that we collaborate with sister ministries like the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, the Ministry of Communities, the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, to address those areas that are outside of our control, particularly in areas that align with the aims and goals of our sister ministries.
Of course. And obviously, I understand that you yourself have been at the World Economic Forum. It was mentioned at the last World Economic Forum that tourism really contributes between 10 and 12% to the global economy. So it is important. How important is it for Guyana in terms of job creation, in terms of money being pumped in the economy? And also, from what I understand, you are becoming a green state and you have a green state agenda. Is that what you just really meant by a previous point, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's all part and parcel. It all goes together. To the first part of your question, tourism contributes directly and indirectly to some 22,000 jobs in Guyana. We know that tourism depending on which data you look at, contributes to between 1 in 9 and 1 in 11 jobs on the planet. It is a sector that is very accessible to many people that might not have a strong socioeconomic background because it's a labor-intensive industry. So with the vast wealth of natural and cultural heritage assets that we have in country, and our focus on not a sole increase or narrow focus on the increase in the number of visitors, but a dual focus on first and foremost, the value that each traveler represents, and incrementally increasing the volume in a controlled manner, we know that we can continue to support job creation. You know, in looking at the Green State Development Strategy, our Green State Development Strategy Vision 2040 is Guyana's 20-year national development policy. It reflects the guiding national vision and the principles of the green agenda. We're extremely thankful that it's bipartisan, that all of our leading political parties are supportive of the Green State Development Strategy. It was developed by all stakeholders and not for any given political party.
All right, that's good news.
It is inclusive development that provides a better quality of life for all citizens of Guyana, which is derived from the country's natural wealth, which we define as our diversity of people, our abundant natural resources, which include land, water, forests, minerals, and of course, our biodiversity. The vision of the green agenda is centered on the principles of the green economy, as you might have gathered, which are defined by sustainable, low carbon, and resilient development that utilizes resources efficiently and thus can be sustained over generations.
Brilliant. And you touched just a little bit as well on the communities. I saw one of your comments, you community-led and owned tourism. How do we see that?
Yeah, that actually has been a really big part in the product development work that we have been doing. Where it is right now, we find that communities are experiencing out-migration a lot, basically with fathers and young people leaving to seek jobs outside of their communities. What tourism helps is addressing some of those social issues, creating jobs for those same groups of people that I just mentioned. And what it also does is, I think, stirs the community from working with extractive industries like logging and mining, and more looking at the sustainable industry like tourism, which helps to create jobs, protect their culture and heritage, and of course their natural resources. So that has really been playing a great part in developing our product and unique experiences, and also protecting our natural culture heritage.
Okay, is there an example of how you really involve the community in the tourism industry?
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that. So it has to be community-led by its very nature. So the role that the Guyana Tourism Authority plays, with product development being one of the many components of our overall portfolio of roles and responsibilities, is to identify communities that are interested in getting involved in travel and tourism. That's the easy part, and that's where the real work begins. Then we assess them based on market access, visitor readiness, strategic visitor flows, where are people coming from, where are they going to, where are they spending money, and a variety of other indicators so that we can make evidence-based decisions in collaboration with the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs in shortlisting the communities that are most likely to be successful. It's one thing to support micro-enterprise development with an entrepreneur. It's quite another to develop community-owned and managed enterprises with upwards of several hundred community members who all have a stake and all have a say in how that enterprise is developed and operated, as well as how it's managed. So we go in initially, and once communities have been selected, determine the level of buy-in at a two-shall level, or the equivalent of a village manager, village council who governs the community, and then the community as a whole. That leads into a collaborative visioning and goal-setting process, which eventually leads into a community tourism development plan that's led by a tourism community that's voted on by the community members themselves. So we basically facilitate that process from product development, business planning, financial management, capacity building, all the way through to establishing market connections and supporting the marketing process. And the nice thing about it is all of those things fall under our mandate. In addition to product development, we're also responsible for training, regulations as it relates to tourism businesses, marketing, and several other areas in destination management, such as supporting national policy, strategy, and planning.
Okay, that makes a total sense. And I saw somewhere on your website that with the Green State agenda and with you focusing so much on sustainable tourism, you contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. I did a project with the United Nations SDGs myself. I'm just wondering which way in particular you contribute via your policy to the goals.
Yeah, the government of Guyana has committed to achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we're actually tracking progress towards that commitment on a year-on-year basis. And as we've seen with all the members of the United Nations World Tourism Organization who have committed to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, recognizing that tourism directly and indirectly contributes to all 17 of the goals. So we know in Guyana that when tourism is well managed, that, as Carla has mentioned, that it can help to achieve positive socioeconomic and conservation outcomes. So all of our work is designed to do that very thing. So all the types of tourism that we support, whether it be community-led and owned, nature-based tourism, scientific, academic, volunteer, and educational travel, or even traditional travel like adventure tourism or festivals and events. We have green guidelines and tourism regulations that support sustainable tourism development for our event managers and our tourism operators to make sure that we're contributing at all levels, because that's ultimately what it takes to, I think, not only achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, but to maintain and increase our commitments to be a leading sustainable destination. Is we have to have travelers involved, businesses, communities, regional government, as well as national government, all working together to play their parts.
Fair enough. And that's what you meant as well, I suppose, by educating the world and locals alike. You basically help the communities to be directly involved in the tourism industry, correct? And you do that quite a bit from what I hear.
It is. It looks at that angle, but it also looks at the fact that Guyana has been historically a relatively unknown destination in the global tourism marketplace, but certainly receiving 6 awards for being a leading sustainable destination between March 2019 and March 2020, as well as being recognized as a leading up-and-coming destination, largely because of its commitment to sustainable tourism in major travel publications like Condé Nast Traveler.
Yeah, one in 20.
Yeah, that has made a huge difference. So now we're in that global arena, and we have to lead by example.
Fair enough. Now, actually, I read an article as well by a travel blogger who went to Guyana, who has in a circle of travelers, and they said quite a few people hadn't been to Antarctica, quite a few people hadn't been to Alaska, but there were like 2 people in a circle, only 2 who had been to Guyana so far. So But it seems like an absolutely great destination. I've traveled myself all the way through South America. At that point, there was no road directly from Brazil or Venezuela into Guyana, which I believe there is now.
From Venezuela into Guyana, no, it's
No?
still is routed through Brazil.
Okay, right. So still not that way. Yeah, then of course we have the virus, and we have a number of movements around the world. And you mentioned earlier yourself that you're focusing on being a leading sustainable destination, particular, you say, given the health crisis and a climate crisis. So we have flights absolutely non-existent at the moment. People say, well, it's not going to happen until October again this year. Then we have movements. I did an interview earlier this year with Flight Free, who basically advise people that they should really just take a train or a bus, which obviously is a bit difficult if you want to go to Guyana. First of all, let's go to the coronavirus. I've seen on the World Health Organization website, there's not that many cases in Guyana, just 48 today, and only 7 people have died so far. How do you deal with the coronavirus as a tourism organization?
From a national standpoint, I think the destination and government was really good in closing our borders pretty early when this started to spread to areas like the U.S., which we have great airline lift with. Mm-hmm. So I think with that to sort of help us to control or minimize the risk for exposure. Yeah. So with that as well, from a national level, we've been having, we're practicing social distancing, increasing sanitation, hygiene practices in public spaces, and even at hotels, etc. Those are being revised at the moment. In addition, from a tourism standpoint, what the agency, the Guyana Tourism Authority, did is that we developed a resiliency strategy for the tourism sector to basically support them during this period and beyond. Okay. And we've been, I think they're really great in getting their feedback as to how it's been impacted, etc., and trying to be an advocate for them at the national level for government support. Yeah. We are getting to see what that support is going to be, but we're hopeful about that.
Okay, brilliant. Right, and if I may ask as well, the climate crisis, obviously, the movements I just spoke about, flight free, staycation, people say do not go away. It has had a massive impact on the Scandinavian countries. Not sure how many visitors you get from there, but 7% less international travelers, in particular by airlines. So how do you feel about this?
I think that the more conscious consumers are in terms of their individual carbon footprints and certainly their consumption choices, that with this great pause that we're experiencing internationally, that people are seeing the improvement in the quality of the environment and realizing that they as individuals can in fact make a difference. I think largely people have felt disempowered because they felt that how can a singular individual make a difference to something so big and significant as climate change. I think Guyana is a leader in this particular arena, and that's not to say that we don't have significant opportunities for making improvements in a variety of different areas, but the fact that over 75% of our forests and ecosystems remain intact, and that is a long-standing focus that will continue into the future. We know that we can support what I think is increasingly being referred to as conservation tourism. Mm-hmm. That is tourism that creates net positive gains in ecosystem services and or biodiversity, so that, for example, we talked about community-led and owned tourism earlier. We have a community that is attracting around 200 travelers a year, but they're protecting a forest that sequesters hundreds of thousands of metric tons of CO2 per year. So if we look at the average carbon footprint per traveler in total, including travel in country, that impact is negligible compared to the amount of forest that's being protected. So when Carla mentioned earlier that we're scaling up community-led and owned tourism, and we talk about the positive conservation outcomes associated with that,
Yep.
travelers who come to Guyana that support our communities that are engaging in protecting the environments that they've been stewards of for a millennia can actually support net positive gains in ecosystem services because there's a strong economic justification for protecting those forests. And it also provides a better quality tourism experience too. You get to see more wildlife, more bird life, and have immersive experience with our indigenous communities. With English being the first language here, there's no barriers to communication as well, which really benefits the traveler as well as the communities as a whole. So I think increasingly as travelers are making those decisions of where to travel, they're going to increasingly look for destinations like Guyana where they know that they can support net positive outcomes associated with their visits.
Yeah, and sure, there were quite a few articles with regards to that as well. UK newspaper The Guardian said, we want to keep our forest, why Guyana wilderness needs visitors. We have article in Geographical saying how Guyana is balancing ecotourism with oil production. We also have another article, it was also from The Guardian, I should say, and they say that the tropical forests are losing their ability to absorb carbon. So what you just said, that it's a carbon sink, and I actually myself believe that very strongly. And that's why I also had an interview not too long ago with Dane Gobbin, which I'm sure you're well aware of. For rainforest, I think, really store carbon. As a matter of fact, I believe it's 1.3 billion tons of carbon per year. That's obviously globally. But that article said that the Amazonian forest might turn into a carbon source in the mid-2030s. I'm not sure if you've seen that article. How do you feel about this, if I may ask?
We have seen the article, but not having a strong background in the science, I don't think I can contribute well to it. But I think, if we're looking at our neighboring destinations, we know that there have been significant challenges in enforcing regulations to protect forests, protect protected areas, and protect the assets, the natural heritage assets that indigenous communities either manage or have land tenure rights over in countries like Brazil, Peru, and in Ecuador. So, we can only control what is under our purview. And I think that we're showing in Guyana that there is a different path, that there is a different way forward here, and can only hope that it influences the management and protection of forests in our neighboring countries, because the lines between our countries are man-made. The ecosystems are stemming from Mother Nature, and we have to protect ecosystems as a whole, I think, as we all know, in order to maintain the integrity of those ecosystems.
Yeah, you mentioned regulations there. How much of the rainforest do you think is protected by these regulations? The percentage of the, I believe, just 75%, 80% is rainforest at the moment, or forest at least. How is that protected by regulations in Guyana?
So our deforestation rates are less than 0.01. I'd have to get you the exact data there, but I think that selective logging and sustainable forestry are the approaches that are utilized here. So there's no clear cutting in the country, and there's no need for excess extraction because so many of our forests are remote. It's not financially viable to extract. And now with the advent of the oil and gas sector, I think that just given the conservation ethic that Carla spoke to earlier, there's a larger cry to protect that natural patrimony even more so now that with our offshore oil reserves, we don't need to pursue extractive industries. And also at the same time, we have a larger commitment, arguably globally, due to the CO2 that'll be released as a result of burning those fossil fuels that are being extracted. So it's even now more paramount than ever before that we protect our natural and cultural heritage, knowing that those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah, that sounds very positive indeed. I've been to Venezuela, obviously, and the delta there, where I traveled in, they found oil underneath there as well. I'm sure that's being shared as well. That oil reserve with Guyana, which seems to be the largest oil reserve in the world, they say. And obviously, if you extract that might also be extracted, I would say, from the Guyanan side as well. So I'm just wondering at a certain point what will happen. But you say there's a very strong indication from the government that they would like to preserve the rainforest. That said, there are a number of articles as well. One is from, you mentioned earlier, Condé Nast, and they say the country will change with the oil coming into the picture. They say get to Guyana before Starbucks gets to Guyana. And say you don't need a crystal ball to really predict the fact that there will be massive changes. And obviously, at a certain point, money will talk, I reckon. And oil obviously means money. How do you feel about this?
Well, I think that if we're blatantly honest with ourselves, there are not a lot of good role models in terms of countries that have benefited from their oil resources. You know, we can certainly look at some of the countries in the Middle East, like the UAE, for example, and Qatar, that have done well with their oil reserves. Norway is perhaps the most commonly cited example of the right way to manage those resources and invest back in the countries. And I think that there are enough key stakeholders in Guyana who want to ensure that the wealth that will come with oil benefits not only each and every resident of the country, but again, protects that national patrimony that Guyana has a legacy of protecting. And when you look at the fact that we have the Green State Development Strategy and the longstanding Green State Agenda as a very strong foundation to build on, we can only hope that political will remain to continue to protect those assets that ultimately differentiate Guyana from every other country in the world. And I think point to the fact that our travel and tourism industry is unique in that it's highly authentic because 99% of the sector is local. We don't have a lot of international brands here. Actually, there are only two in our sector, two hotel brands. So I think the interest is in maintaining that hyper-local nature of the industry, which will help us maintain the authenticity of what's available here.
Oh, that I didn't know that. So there's not many, basically if tourists go to Guyana, it's not like they take an all-inclusive holiday of which the money streams out of the country directly. It will actually be pumped directly in the Guyanan economy and to the benefit of the communities. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I think if we look at the international average for every dollar spent directly from tourism, that $2 additional are created in indirect and induced economic impacts that, you know, we'd probably be on the high end of that average since most of the money is circulated within the local economy.
Brilliant. And you mentioned earlier as well, it's cross-party, the Green State Agenda was cross-party. So the current elections, or the elections that just finished, have not made any difference in that. And Guyana will continue on the very positive path that they have done so for the past number of years.
So sorry, what's the question?
With the government, which is most likely the same as the previous government, is that already been determined, or and will the policy be the same over the next coming years?
Well, the result of that is still to be determined, but this, whatever the outcome, I believe the way the plan was designed, it basically secured buy-in from, I think, the leading parties, both sides, including the smaller parties. So for continuity, that is definitely going to be the path that Guyana will continue to proceed on.
Yep.
I think that having 80% forest coverage with prolific wildlife, mountain tip use, etc., I think it is in our best interest to protect that. I think as well, I think we have a very active, what I would say, private sector and civil sector that I think are very open to playing their role in making sure that we continue on the path that we've set.
Now that's brilliant news. So then to conclusion, obviously, where can people find you, and what would you like to mention still as an end note? First of all, where can people find you?
Well, first off, our website is the easiest way to learn all that you can about our beautiful and unique destination. And the website is www.guyanatourism.com.
Okay.
You can also find us on Facebook. You just need to look for Discover Guyana.
Okay, brilliant. And is there anything that you would like to mention still about maybe some events that will go on over the next year, or anything that you would like to say as an end note?
Well, I think that travelers are going to even become more discerning in the destinations that they choose. And we know that destination sustainability should grow in importance. It seems like no matter what data that you look at, the number of travelers who are increasingly making decisions, not only on price, quality, and convenience, but the sustainability of the destinations that they choose and the businesses that they patron is increasing. And we imagine and anticipate the same will be true for destination health. So as we alluded earlier, we'll be increasingly investing in health, sanitation, and hygiene improvements at a national, regional, community, and business level, so that when travelers are considering where they can travel next, they can not only know that they can travel to Guyana and positively impact the people and the places that they visit here in country, but do so in a safe way as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Brian, Carla, it was absolutely fantastic to have you on the podcast. It probably will be live next week Tuesday. And that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. Please do send a link and we'll help get the word out.
Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So that was the podcast with Brian and Carla. That's Carla, James, and Brian Mullis. It was great to have them on the show. I'll put all the links in the show notes. You can find the latest news on podcasts.earth. You've been listening to Peter de Vries. Thank you for doing so. And please tune in next time to A Travel Companion.